If there's one lesson I've learned after 22 years of marriage, it's this. Trust your instincts when something feels off. My husband didn't just betray our vows. He transferred our entire $2 million retirement fund to his secret girlfriend in Dubai. It's a brilliant investment opportunity, he said with that practiced smile I once found charming. What he didn't know was that I'd been quietly preparing for this moment for months. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Rebecca. Perfect timing, Thomas exclaimed as I walked through our front door. His overly enthusiastic tone immediately set off alarm bells in my head. I'd just returned from visiting my sister in Boston for a week, and something about his welcoming demeanor felt rehearsed, almost theatrical. I'm back, I replied cautiously, setting down my carry-on in our spacious foyer. The house looked the same, the artwork we'd collected over 2 decades of marriage still hanging precisely where I'd left it. But something felt different. Thomas was dressed in his expensive charcoal Armani suit, unusual for a Thursday afternoon when he typically worked from home in casual attire. "How was the flight?" he asked, taking my coat with unexpected attentiveness. "You must be exhausted." "Come, I've opened that Cabernet you love, the 2016 Reserve." Another red flag. Thomas only brought out the good wine when he was about to deliver bad news or ask for a favor. In our 22 years together, I'd learned to read these small signals. "Fine," I said, accepting the glass while studying his face. The slight creases around his eyes, the perfectly maintained salt and pepper hair that had once made my heart race. Now his familiar features seemed like a mask. "What's going on, Thomas? You seem excited about something." He grinned widely, swirling his own wine glass with practiced elegance. "Well, I've been waiting for you to get back to share some amazing news. I've made a significant financial move that's going to change everything for us." My stomach tightened into a knot. Throughout our marriage, Thomas's significant financial moves had ranged from questionable to disastrous, each one pitched with this exact same enthusiasm. There was the tech startup that folded 6 months after he invested a year's salary. The cryptocurrency venture that evaporated overnight. Each time that same confident smile, those same grand promises. "What kind of move?" I asked, keeping my voice steady as I followed him into our living room, where floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the lake we'd chosen for our forever home. Thomas's grin widened as he settled into his leather armchair. "You know how we've been talking about retiring early, maybe buying that villa in Spain?" He didn't wait for me to answer. "Well, I found something even better, a real estate development in Dubai that's going to double, maybe triple, our investment within 2 years." I took a careful sip of wine, letting the rich flavor steady my nerves. "That sounds ambitious. What kind of investment are we talking about?" He casually leaned forward, elbows on knees, the picture of confidence. "This is cutting edge, Rebecca. Luxury high-rises with smart technology built into every unit. It's going to revolutionize the property market there." He paused for effect, watching my reaction. "I transferred our retirement fund. All of it." The wine glass nearly slipped from my hand, liquid sloshing dangerously close to the rim. "All of it? The full 2 million? Without discussing it with me first?" The money represented 20 years of careful saving, the vacations we hadn't taken, the house renovations we'd postponed, our security, our future. "Rebecca, opportunities like this don't wait for lengthy discussions," he said dismissively, waving his hand as if swatting away an annoying insect. "My contact there needed an immediate commitment. The development is already 60% sold out. When you see the projected returns, you'll understand why I had to move quickly." "Your contact," I repeated slowly, setting my glass down on the coffee table with deliberate care. "And who exactly is handling our life savings in Dubai?" Thomas's eyes flickered away for just a moment, a tell I'd come to recognize when he was about to lie, before meeting mine again. Her name is Amara. She's brilliant, Oxford-educated, connected to all the right developers. She's already secured us a prime position in the investment pool. Her, I said, my voice low. The single word hung in the air between us. And how exactly did you connect with this, Amara? He waved his hand dismissively. A business conference last year in London, International Investment Strategies. She gave a keynote that impressed everyone. He stood up, suddenly restless, moving to the window to look out at the water. Look, I know this seems sudden, but you need to trust me on this. Our retirement fund wasn't just sitting there collecting mediocre interest, it's now actively building our future. I watched him standing there, his silhouette outlined against the evening sky. This man I'd shared my life with for over 2 decades. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. The late-night phone calls he took in his office, voice lowered. The sudden business trips to investment seminars abroad that extended over weekends. The new cologne he'd started wearing 6 months ago. Oud and sandalwood, exotic scents he'd never shown interest in before. The mysteriously increasing cell phone bill I'd noticed while paying our monthly expenses. This wasn't just about money. This was about a woman in Dubai. And our entire financial future was now in her hands, or more likely, already gone. When did you make this transfer? I asked, my voice somehow still steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. Last week, he replied, turning back to face me, a hint of defensiveness creeping into his tone. The timing was crucial, while I was conveniently away visiting my sister. Of course. And this is a legitimate investment company? With proper documentation. Contracts? I pressed. Thomas's jaw tightened slightly. It's all above board, Rebecca. Amara has provided everything. The paperwork is in my office. I can show you the prospectus tomorrow when you're not so tired. He softened his tone, approaching to refill my wine glass. I know it's a lot to take in, but this is going to set us up for the retirement we've always dreamed about. Trust me. Trust him. The words echoed hollowly in my mind. Trust the man who had just moved our entire life savings without my knowledge or consent. Trust the man who was almost certainly having an affair with this mysterious Amara. What Thomas didn't know. What made his confident smile so infuriating as he stood there pouring more wine like some magnanimous provider was that I wasn't as oblivious as he thought. The retirement account wasn't the only thing I'd been carefully monitoring, and I had made some preparations of my own. Later that night, I sat alone in our guest bathroom, the only place I could be certain Thomas wouldn't suddenly appear, and let the full weight of his betrayal crash over me. My hands trembled as I scrolled through our joint account statement on my phone. There it was, just as he'd said, a wire transfer for $2,037,592.48 to Amara Holdings LLC in Dubai. Our entire retirement fund gone with a single transaction. The number on the screen blurred as tears filled my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. This wasn't just money. This was 22 years of our lives together, distilled into digits and decimals. I thought about what that money represented. The beach house in North Carolina we'd been saving for. The college fund we'd established for our nieces and nephews. The security we'd worked so hard to build after both coming from families where money was always tight. I remembered how we'd celebrated when we hit the $1 million mark. Thomas had brought home champagne, and we'd toasted on our back deck, watching the sunset and talking about all the places we'd visit when we finally retired. Paris in the spring, New Zealand in the fall, a month-long cruise through the Mediterranean. Dreams we'd carefully cultivated, sacrificing immediate gratification for long-term security. And now it was all in the hands of Amara, a woman I'd never met, but who had somehow convinced my husband to gamble away our future. I closed the banking app and opened our photo gallery instead, scrolling back through happier times. Our 20th anniversary trip to Italy. Thomas, smiling next to me at our favorite restaurant on Valentine's Day last year. How could the same man who had looked at me with such apparent love now betray me so completely? Perhaps the signs had been there all along, and I'd simply chosen to ignore them. The gradual emotional distance. The way our conversations had become increasingly superficial. The subtle shift in his priorities that I'd attributed to midlife restlessness rather than infidelity. A text notification popped up on my screen, my sister Olivia checking to see if I'd made it home safely. I hesitated, then typed, "Home safe. Need to talk tomorrow. Important." I couldn't bring myself to explain over text what had happened. The humiliation was too fresh, too raw. Rising from the edge of the bathtub where I'd been sitting, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror. I hardly recognized the woman staring back at me. Pale, shell-shocked, the confidence I'd carried throughout my career as a financial advisor now visibly shaken. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent 2 decades helping others secure their financial futures, while my own husband had decimated ours. As I splashed cold water on my face, a memory surfaced. Thomas laughing at a client of mine who'd been scammed out of his savings. How could anyone be so gullible? He'd asked. The recollection sent a fresh wave of anger through me. Had he been planning this for months? Had our marriage been nothing but a facade all this time? When I finally emerged from the bathroom, Thomas was already in bed, scrolling through his phone with an air of casual indifference. He glanced up briefly. "You okay? You've been in there a while." "Just tired from the trip," I lied, slipping under the covers on my side of the bed, as far from him as possible without being obvious. "I've been thinking," he said, setting his phone down. "We should take a trip to Dubai in the fall. I could introduce you to Amara, show you the development site. Once you see it in person, you'll understand why this was such an incredible opportunity." The casual way he mentioned her name made my skin crawl, as if she were just a business associate, as if I were a child who needed visual aids to grasp a complex concept. "Maybe," I said noncommittally, turning away from him. "Let's talk about it tomorrow. I'm exhausted." I felt rather than saw him shrug before turning off his bedside lamp. Within minutes, his breathing deepened into sleep. The untroubled sleep of a man who believed he'd gotten away with something. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through options, consequences, and next steps. The $2 million wasn't just our retirement fund. It was our safety net, our future security, our protection against the unpredictable. And now it was gone, transferred to a woman in Dubai who had clearly ensnared my husband in more ways than one. When sleep finally came, it was fitful and filled with fragmented dreams. Thomas and a faceless woman laughing as they counted stacks of money. Me, suddenly old and destitute, begging on street corners. Our beautiful lake house being sold at auction while strangers picked through our belongings. I woke before dawn, my pillow damp with tears. I didn't remember crying. Thomas was still asleep, one arm flung carelessly across what used to be my side of the bed. I slipped out quietly and went to the kitchen, mechanically brewing coffee as the first hint of sunrise painted the lake in shades of pink and gold. Standing at the window, watching daybreak over the water, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The panic and shock of the previous night had burned away, leaving behind a cold, clear determination. If Thomas thought I would simply accept what he'd done, the betrayal of our marriage vows, the theft of our financial security, he was sorely mistaken. I'd spent my entire career teaching clients how to protect their assets, how to plan for contingencies, how to secure their futures against both expected and unexpected events. It was time to apply that expertise to my own situation. Opening my laptop at the kitchen table, I began to make a list of everything I knew for certain. Thomas had transferred our entire retirement fund without my consent. The money had gone to an LLC in Dubai run by a woman named Amara. Based on his pattern of behavior over the past 6 months, he was almost certainly having an affair with her. He had committed financial infidelity of the highest order. What Thomas didn't realize was that I'd been watching him more carefully than he knew. After finding a suspicious text on his phone 3 months ago, quickly deleted when he realized I'd seen it, I'd begun taking precautions. Not just emotional preparations for the possibility that my marriage was in trouble, but practical, concrete steps to protect myself. The question now was how to proceed. Confronting him again would likely lead nowhere. He'd already shown he was willing to lie to my face. No. I needed leverage. I needed evidence. I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with before making my next move. As I sipped my coffee, watching the morning light strengthen across the lake, I thought about the safe deposit box I'd opened at a different bank, the consultation I'd had with a divorce attorney on behalf of a friend, the detailed records I'd been keeping of Thomas's increasingly suspicious behavior. Little breadcrumbs of protection I'd left for myself, just in case the worst happened. And now the worst had happened. I heard movement upstairs, Thomas getting ready for his day, as if nothing had changed, as if he hadn't just destroyed everything we'd built together. The sound of the shower running, his off-key humming echoing down the stairwell. The sheer normality of it enraged me. Setting down my coffee cup, I made a decision. I would not confront him. Not yet. First, I would gather information. I would build my case methodically, the way I'd taught countless clients to document their financial histories. And then, when I had everything I needed, I would take action. Thomas had no idea what was coming. He thought he'd married someone who would fold in the face of his betrayal, someone who would believe his lies and accept his justifications. He was about to discover just how wrong he was. When Thomas came downstairs, dressed impeccably in another expensive suit, he acted as if nothing had changed. He kissed the top of my head, something he hadn't done in months, and poured himself coffee from the pot I'd made. "I've got meetings all day, but I was thinking we could go out for dinner tonight," he said casually. "Celebrate your homecoming properly. Maybe that new Italian place you've been wanting to try?" "That sounds nice," I replied, maintaining the facade. Let him think I was processing, adjusting, accepting. "Will you be home by 7? "Should be," he said, checking his watch, the Rolex I'd given him for our 20th anniversary. "I'll make a reservation. And Rebecca?" He paused at the doorway. "Try not to worry about the investment. It's all going to work out beautifully." The moment his car disappeared down our long driveway, I sprang into action. I had a narrow window of opportunity while Thomas was at work, and I intended to use every minute of it. First, I called my boss at the financial advisory firm where I'd worked for 15 years. "David, I need to take a few personal days," I told him. "Family emergency." "Everything okay, Rebecca?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. In all my years at the firm, I'd rarely taken time off, even when I'd had pneumonia last winter. "Not really," I admitted. "But I'm handling it. I'll explain everything later." "Take whatever time you need," he said. "Your clients are covered. Just let me know if there's anything I can do." With that taken care of, I headed to Thomas's home office. The sleek, minimalist space had always been his sanctuary, a place I rarely entered out of respect for his privacy. That respect had clearly not been mutual. I sat at his desk, running my fingers along the polished mahogany surface. This was where he'd made the transfer. This was where he'd betrayed everything we'd built together. Taking a deep breath, I opened his laptop. The password screen glowed mockingly at me. 10 years ago, I wouldn't have known how to proceed. But Thomas had underestimated me in more ways than one. 3 months ago, after finding that suspicious text, I'd installed a keystroke logger on his computer, a small program that recorded everything he typed. It wasn't something I was proud of, but my intuition had been screaming that something was wrong, and I needed to protect myself. I retrieved the logs from my secure email account and found his most recent password, Amara 2024. The blatant confirmation of my suspicions sent a fresh wave of anger through me. Once inside his system, I worked methodically. First, I checked his email. There they were, dozens of exchanges with Amara Khalid, dating back 11 months. I forced myself to read through them, documenting the evolution from professional correspondence to intimate messages. The way she'd flattered his business acumen. The way he'd responded to her attention. Their plans to meet during his business trips. I downloaded everything, backing it up to a secure cloud account only I could access. Next, I examined his financial records. The transfer to Amara Holdings LLC wasn't the only one. There had been smaller transfers over the past 6 months, $50,000 here, $75,000 there, drawn from his personal accounts. Money I hadn't even known he had access to. But here was where my professional expertise became my hidden advantage. As a certified financial advisor specializing in high-net-worth retirement planning, I understood exactly what Thomas had done. And more importantly, I knew exactly what legal protections existed for situations like this. Because in his arrogance, Thomas had made a critical error. While we lived in an equitable distribution state, retirement accounts were subject to special rules, and transferring funds from a qualified retirement account without spousal consent wasn't just morally reprehensible, it was illegal. I pulled up the records of our retirement accounts. As I suspected, the transfer had been made from our joint QLSE, Qualified Longevity Annuity Contract, a specialized retirement vehicle that required explicit consent from both parties for any early withdrawal or transfer. Consent I had never given. A grim smile spread across my face as I documented everything. Thomas might think he'd been clever, but he'd actually committed financial fraud, both against me and potentially against federal pension regulations. But I needed more than just evidence of the transfers. I needed to understand exactly who Amara was and what this investment opportunity entailed. I searched for Amara Holdings LLC and found almost nothing. Just a registration in Dubai dated 3 months ago, no website, no business history, no portfolio of successful developments. It had all the hallmarks of a shell company. Next, I searched for Amara Khalid. Her LinkedIn profile claimed she had an Oxford education and extensive experience in international real estate development, but the details were vague. Her connections were few, and most appeared to be fake profiles with stock photo images. I dug deeper, using resources from my professional network that Thomas wouldn't have known I had access to. International business registries, financial, watch list databases, property records in Dubai. What I found confirmed my suspicions. There was no major real estate development. The address listed for Amara Holdings matched a small office building in Dubai that housed dozens of shell companies. And Amara Khalid had been flagged in a financial watchdog database for suspected involvement in similar schemes targeting wealthy Western businessmen. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Thomas hadn't just betrayed me emotionally, he'd fallen for one of the oldest scams in the book. An attractive woman flattering his ego, promising spectacular returns, creating a sense of exclusivity and urgency, and he'd handed over our entire life savings without a second thought. Part of me wanted to confront him immediately, to shake him and demand to know how he could have been so blindingly stupid. But the strategic part of me, the part that had built a successful career helping people navigate complex financial situations, knew better. If I revealed what I knew now, Thomas might try to cover his tracks, or worse, attempt to move more. Money? No, I needed to be smarter than that. I needed to leverage what I knew to protect what remained of our assets. I continued my search, documenting everything. By noon, I had compiled a devastating dossier. Evidence of the unauthorized transfers, Thomas's communications with Amara, research exposing her fraudulent operation, and documentation of the legal violations inherent in transferring retirement funds without proper consent. But my most powerful advantage wasn't just in the evidence I'd gathered. It was in the steps I'd already taken to protect myself. 6 weeks ago, after noticing Thomas's increasingly erratic financial behavior, I had opened a separate retirement account in my name only. I'd transferred a portion of my personal savings, money, I'd inherited from my parents years before, into this protected account. It wasn't nearly enough to replace what Thomas had lost, but it was a financial cushion he didn't know existed. I had also consulted with Patricia Winters, one of the top divorce attorneys in the state, ostensibly seeking advice for a client. Patricia had outlined exactly what documentation would be needed if that client ever needed to file for divorce on grounds of financial misconduct. Documentation I now had in abundance. As I sat in Thomas's office, surrounded by evidence of his betrayal, I felt a curious mix of emotions. Devastation that my marriage had come to this. Rage at his callous disregard for our shared future. But also, unexpectedly, a sense of clarity and purpose I hadn't felt in years. For too long, I had deferred to Thomas on major decisions, allowed his confidence to override my caution, accepted his dismissal of my concerns. No more. This was my life too, my future he had gambled away, and I would use every resource at my disposal to reclaim it. I carefully copied all the evidence to my secure cloud storage, then erased any trace of my search from his computer. Let him continue to believe I was in the dark. Let him think his charm and excuses would be enough to placate me. Thomas had always been the risk-taker in our relationship, the one who leapt before looking. But now, as I quietly closed his office door and headed to make the next call on my list, I realized that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in taking risks, but in being prepared when those risks inevitably backfire. Thomas thought he held all the cards. He was about to discover just how wrong he was. I needed someone I could trust completely, someone who would understand both the financial and emotional devastation I was facing. With shaking hands, I picked up my phone and called my sister Olivia. "I was wondering when you'd call," she answered, after the first ring. "Your cryptic text had me worried." "Can you talk now?" I asked, glancing at the clock. Thomas wouldn't be home for hours, but I still felt the pressure of time bearing down on me. "Give me 5 minutes to wrap up this meeting," she said, her voice shifting to professional politeness. "I'll call you right back." While waiting for her call, I paced our living room, looking at the photographs on the mantel. Thomas and me on our honeymoon in Bali, at his industry award ceremony 3 years ago, celebrating my promotion to senior advisor at the firm. Had those happy moments been real, or was our entire marriage built on illusions? When Olivia called back, I didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Thomas transferred our entire retirement fund, over $2 million, to a woman in Dubai he's been having an affair with," I said, the words tumbling out in a rush. There was a moment of stunned silence before Olivia's voice came through, tight with controlled anger. "I'm sorry, he did what?" "He claims it's an investment opportunity," I continued, sinking onto the couch. "A real estate development that's going to triple our money. But I've been investigating all morning, Liv. The company's a shell. The woman, Amara, has been flagged for running similar scams. It's gone. All of it." "That absolute bastard," she hissed. "How long have you known about the affair?" "I suspected for months, found a text, noticed changes in his behavior. But this is beyond anything I imagined. Have you confronted him?" "Not yet. I'm gathering evidence first. I need to be strategic about this." Olivia had always been my polar opposite. Where I was measured and cautious, she was bold and direct. But as a corporate litigator, she understood the value of preparation. Smart, she said, and I could hear her shifting into professional mode. What do you need from me? Advice, a sounding board, maybe a place to stay if things get ugly. You've got all three, she said without hesitation. But Becca, this is serious financial fraud. You need more than just a sister with a couch. You need a team. I know, I said, rubbing my temples where a headache was beginning to form. I'm thinking of calling Patricia Winters. I consulted with her a few weeks ago, hypothetically. Good. She's excellent. But you also need a forensic accountant, someone who can trace where the money went and document everything for court. This was why I'd called Olivia first. She understood the legal battlefield I was about to enter. You know someone? I asked. Michael Chen at Deloitte. He specializes in high net worth divorces and financial fraud. I've worked with him on cases. I heard her typing. I'm sending you his contact information now. Tell him I referred you. He'll make time for you immediately. My phone pinged with the incoming information. Thank you, Liv. What's your immediate plan? Are you safe staying there with Thomas? The question caught me off guard. Safe? Thomas has never been violent. People do unpredictable things when their schemes collapse, she said, her tone serious. And make no mistake, Rebecca. His scheme is about to collapse spectacularly. I thought about Thomas's reaction when I'd mentioned the police yesterday, the flash of anger in his eyes, quickly masked by charm. I think I'm safe for now. He still believes I'm in the dark about most of it. That's good. Maintain that illusion as long as possible while we get everything in place. There was a pause. Do you have access to any funds he can't touch? Enough to live on if you need to leave suddenly. Yes, I said, thinking of my secret account. Not much compared to what we've lost, but enough to keep me going for a few months. Good. Now listen to me carefully, Rebecca. This is going to be a marathon, not a sprint. Thomas has committed serious financial fraud, both against you and possibly against federal regulations governing retirement accounts. But building a case takes time. I understand. I can be there tomorrow, she continued. I'll clear my calendar and work remotely for a few days. You don't need to do that, I protested, though the thought of having her physically present was deeply comforting. Yes, I do, she said firmly. You need someone in your corner who isn't emotionally invested in Thomas. Someone who can help you stick to the plan when it gets hard. Tears welled in my eyes. Throughout our lives, Olivia had always been my fierce protector, from playground bullies to my first heartbreak in college. Once again, she was stepping into that role without hesitation. Okay, I conceded, but let me get through tonight first. Thomas wants to take me to dinner to celebrate my homecoming. She made a disgusted sound. The audacity of that man. Can you get through it without tipping him off? I think so, I said, though my stomach turned at the thought of sitting across from him, pretending everything was normal. I've gotten good at hiding my feelings lately. That's the saddest thing I've heard all day, Olivia said softly. All right, here's what we do. You get through dinner, act normal, concerned about the investment but willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. Meanwhile, I'll contact Patricia and Michael, brief them on the situation. First thing tomorrow, we meet with them. Start building your case formally. As she outlined the plan, I felt something solidify within me, a framework of support around the raw wound of betrayal. I wasn't alone in this. I had allies who believed in me, experts who could guide me through the legal and financial minefield ahead. One more thing, Olivia added, her voice hardening. Forward me any evidence you've collected so far. If something happens to your copies, we need backups. I hadn't considered that Thomas might find and delete my evidence. Good point. I'll send it securely as soon as we hang up. And Rebecca? When this all comes out, and it will, Thomas is going to try to paint you as the villain. He'll claim you're overreacting, that you misunderstood, that you're trying to ruin him out of spite. Prepare yourself for that. I know, I said, thinking. of how charming Thomas could be, how convincing. How many of our friends would believe his version of events? No matter what happens, remember that you did nothing wrong, Olivia continued. He betrayed you, financially, emotionally, completely. You're just protecting yourself from further harm. After we hung up, I sat still for several minutes, absorbing the reality of what lay ahead. The divorce, the legal battle, the public exposure of Thomas's betrayal, and my private humiliation. It was daunting, overwhelming. But I was no longer adrift. I had a sister who would move mountains for me. I had professional connections who could help navigate these treacherous waters. I had evidence that would speak the truth, even when Thomas tried to twist it. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the lake Thomas and I had chosen for our forever home. 22 years of marriage, more than half my life spent with a man who could steal my future without a second thought. My phone pinged with a text from Thomas. Reservation confirmed for 7:30 at Bello. Looking forward to a special evening with my beautiful wife. The words made me physically ill, but I forced myself to respond with a simple, looking forward to it too. Then I turned to my computer and began the methodical process of securing and forwarding all the evidence I'd gathered. Bank records, emails, research on Amara and her fraudulent company. I organized everything meticulously, the way I would for a high-stakes client presentation, and sent it through an encrypted connection to Olivia. When Thomas returned home that evening, I'd be ready. I would smile and make small talk. I would pretend to listen as he spun tales about our glorious investment future. I would clink glasses and maintain the facade of a trusting wife. But inside, I would know the truth. And I would be preparing for war. As I hit send on the encrypted files, my phone rang again. It was Michael Chen, the forensic accountant Olivia had recommended. "Mrs. Harrington?" he said when I answered. "My name is Michael Chen. Your sister briefed me on your situation. I want you to know that I've seen cases like yours before, and there are specific legal avenues available when a spouse misappropriates retirement funds." His calm, professional tone steadied me. "Thank you for calling so quickly. What should I be doing right now to protect myself?" "Document everything, which I understand you've already started. Don't confront your husband until we've had a chance to analyze the money trail. And most importantly, don't sign anything, no matter how benign it seems." "I won't," I promised. "Good. I've cleared my morning schedule for tomorrow. We'll meet at Patricia Winter's office at 9 a.m. Between the four of us, you, your sister, Patricia, and myself, will develop a comprehensive strategy." As I hung up, I felt a strange sensation spreading through me. Not exactly hope, but something adjacent to it. Determination, perhaps. Or the calm that comes from knowing you're no longer facing a storm alone. Thomas had betrayed me in every way possible. But in doing so, he had inadvertently revealed just how many people were willing to stand beside me when it mattered most. That, at least, was something he couldn't take away. Dinner with Thomas that night was an exercise in self-control. I wore a black dress he'd always complimented, applied makeup carefully to hide the pallor stress had left on my face, and even managed to slide on my wedding band, which I'd taken, off the moment I discovered his betrayal. Bello was everything an upscale Italian restaurant should be. Dim lighting, attentive service, and prices that made you wince if you stopped to think about them. Thomas ordered an expensive bottle of Barolo and raised his glass in a toast. "To us," he said, eyes twinkling with confidence. "And to new beginnings," I forced, my lips into a smile and clinked my glass against his. "To new beginnings," I echoed, thinking of the meeting scheduled for 9 a.m. tomorrow. Thomas launched into an elaborate description of the Dubai development, luxury apartments with smart home, technology, private beaches, helicopter access. He painted a picture of opulent wealth that would supposedly be ours once the development was complete. I nodded at appropriate intervals, asked questions that wouldn't arouse suspicion, and pretended to be cautiously coming around to his vision. "No, it was a shock," he said, reaching across the table to take my hand. "But you have to trust me, Rebecca. Have I ever steered us wrong before?" I thought of the failed investments, the business ventures that had collapsed, the financial holes I'd quietly patched with my own salary over the years. "Everyone makes mistakes," I said diplomatically. He laughed, interpreting my response as forgiveness rather than the indictment it was. "Exactly. But this isn't a mistake. This is the opportunity of a lifetime." As he continued talking, I studied him. This man I'd shared my life with. The silver at his temples that I once found distinguished. The laugh lines around his eyes that had deepened with our years together. The manicured hands that had touched me with tenderness and now felt like those of a stranger. Had he always been this person? Or had something changed him along the way? "When did you first meet Amara?" I asked during a lull in conversation, keeping my tone light, merely curious. "At that investment conference in London last year," he said easily. "She gave a presentation on emerging markets that blew everyone away. We got talking at the reception afterward." I nodded, remembering the conference, how he'd extended his trip by 2 days for networking opportunities. "She must be very persuasive," I said, sipping my wine. "She's brilliant," Thomas replied, a hint of defensiveness creeping into his voice. "Harvard Business School, 10 years at Goldman Sachs before striking out on her own. She knows the Dubai market inside and out. Every word was a lie. My research had shown no Harvard degree, no Goldman Sachs employment, but I simply nodded. "I'd like to speak with her sometime, since our life savings are in her hands." "Of course," Thomas said too quickly. "I'll set up a video call soon. You'll see why I trust her." The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of forced smiles and meaningless conversation. By the time we arrived home, I was exhausted from the performance. As we prepared for bed, Thomas tried to kiss me with intent, but I pleaded a headache from the wine. He accepted the excuse without question, rolling over to his side of the bed with an easy, "Good night, honey." I lay awake beside him, listening to his breathing deepen into sleep, repulsed by the closeness of his body. How many times had he been with Amara while pretending everything was normal at home? How many lies had he told me with that same casual confidence? When I was certain he was asleep, I slipped out of bed and sent a text to Olivia. "Dinner done. He suspects nothing. See you tomorrow at 9. Her response came immediately. "Everything in place. Try to get some sleep." But sleep remained elusive. Instead, I spent hours mentally preparing for the morning ahead, rehearsing what I would say, how I would present my case to the professionals who were about to become central figures in my life. At 10 a.m., I rose before Thomas and went through the motions of my normal morning routine. Coffee brewing, breakfast prepared, casual mention of a client emergency meeting to explain my early departure. Thomas barely looked up from his phone as I kissed his cheek goodbye, a gesture that once felt natural and now required every ounce of my acting ability. "Have a good day," he said absently. "I'll be home late. Quarterly review with the team." Another lie, I suspected, but it suited my purposes. "That's fine. I might grab dinner with Olivia. She's in town for a case." He nodded, clearly unconcerned with my plans. How convenient his indifference was now. Patricia Winter's law office occupied the top floor of a sleek downtown building. The reception area, all cool grays and muted blues, exuded quiet confidence and discretion. Olivia was already waiting when I arrived, impeccably dressed in one of her courtroom suits. "You okay?" she asked, embracing me. "You look like you haven't slept." "I haven't, really," I admitted. "But I'm ready for this." She squeezed my arm. "Remember, these people are on your side. Just tell them everything, exactly as it happened." Patricia appeared moments later, a commanding presence in her 60s with silver hair cut in a precise bob and penetrating blue eyes that seemed to absorb everything. She led us to a conference room where Michael Chen, the forensic accountant, was already reviewing documents. "Mrs. Harrington," Patricia said, shaking my hand firmly. "I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." "Please, call me Rebecca," I said, taking a seat at the polished table. "Rebecca," she acknowledged with a nod. "Your sister has briefed me on the situation, but I'd like to hear it directly from you." For the next 30 minutes, I recounted everything, from the first suspicious text I'd found months ago to Thomas's casual announcement about transferring our retirement fund. I detailed my investigation, the evidence I'd gathered, and my interactions with Thomas since discovering the fraud. Patricia took minimal notes, her focus entirely on my words. Michael listened intently, occasionally asking for clarification about specific financial details. When I finished, there was a moment of silence. "First," Patricia said finally, "I want to acknowledge your composure and foresight. Many clients in your position are too devastated to act as strategically as you have. The evidence you've gathered will be invaluable." Her validation brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "Thank you," I managed. "Now let's discuss your options," she continued, her tone shifting to brisk professionalism. "Based on what you've told us and the documentation you've provided, we're dealing with several distinct legal issues: unauthorized transfer of retirement, funds, potential wire fraud, and the basis for a divorce on grounds of financial misconduct and adultery." Michael nodded in agreement. "The QLAC transfer is particularly significant. Federal law requires spousal consent for any movement of qualified retirement assets. Without your signature on a spousal consent form, the transfer was illegal." "Which means what exactly?" I asked. "It means we have grounds to freeze the assets immediately through an emergency court order," Patricia explained. "If we can locate the funds before they're dispersed further, there's a chance of recovery." A flicker of hope sparked within me. "You think we could get the money back?" "Some of it, potentially," Michael said cautiously. "International financial recovery is complex, especially with Dubai involved. But the illegality of the transfer gives us leverage with both domestic and international financial institutions." Patricia slid a document across the table. "This is an application for an emergency temporary restraining order on all your joint financial accounts. It will prevent Thomas from moving any additional assets while we proceed. I need your signature. To file it today." I scanned the document, the legal terminology swimming before my eyes. Olivia leaned over, pointing to specific sections. "This freezes all joint accounts but leaves your personal accounts untouched. It also requires Thomas to provide a full accounting of all financial activity for the past 18 months. "Will he know about this immediately?" I asked, pen poised. "Over the signature line. He'll be legally served within 24 hours, Patricia confirmed. "At that point, the element of surprise will be gone. Are you prepared for his reaction?" I thought about Thomas. His charm, his temper when challenged, his ability to twist situations to his advantage. I'll have to be. "You won't face him alone," Olivia said firmly. "I'll be with you when he's served." I signed the document, the scratching of pen on paper sounding unnaturally loud in the quiet room. Patricia took the signed form and handed it to her assistant, who had appeared silently at the door. "File this immediately," she instructed. Turning back to me, she continued, "Now, we need to discuss next steps. Michael will begin forensic analysis of all financial records to document exactly what happened to the money. Meanwhile, I recommend we file for legal separation immediately, followed by divorce proceedings." "How public will this be?" I asked, the thought of our friends, colleagues, and neighbors knowing the details of Thomas's betrayal making me queasy. "Court records are public," Patricia acknowledged. "But we can request certain financial details be sealed. The narrative becomes important here. We control what information is emphasized in our filings." Michael cleared his throat. There's another aspect to consider. If your husband has committed wire fraud, which seems likely based on the evidence, there may be criminal implications. The word criminal hung in the air. Despite everything Thomas had done, the thought of him facing criminal charges was jarring. Would I have to be the one to report him? I asked quietly. Patricia and Michael exchanged glances. Not necessarily, Patricia said. The court may be obligated to refer evidence of financial crimes to the appropriate authorities. However, your cooperation with any subsequent investigation would be advised. Olivia placed her hand over mine. One step at a time, Becca. Today, we focus on protecting what assets remain and establishing the legal framework for your separation. The rest can be addressed as it comes. I nodded, grateful for her steady presence. What do I need to do now? Go home and gather any additional financial documents you can find, Michael instructed. Bank statements, investment reports, tax returns. Anything that helps us create a complete picture of your financial situation. And prepare yourself, Patricia added. Once Thomas is served, everything changes. He may become desperate, angry, or attempt to manipulate you into dropping the proceedings. It's crucial that you not engage with him directly about legal matters. All communication should go through my office. As the meeting concluded, I felt simultaneously overwhelmed and strangely empowered. The machinery of justice was now in motion. Thomas's actions would no longer remain in the shadows, his betrayal no longer my private burden to bear alone. Outside the office, Olivia pulled me into a fierce hug. You did great in there. How are you feeling? Like I'm having an out-of-body experience, I admitted. Is this really happening? It is, she said gently. But you're handling it with incredible strength. And now you have professionals fighting for you. I nodded, looking back at the imposing building that housed Patricia's office. For the first time since discovering Thomas's betrayal, I felt something shift inside me. A rebalancing of power. He had acted with complete disregard for me, for our marriage, for our future. Now, the legal system would hold him accountable. What time will Thomas be served? I asked. Patricia's office is filing the order this morning. The process server will likely deliver it to his office this afternoon. Olivia checked her watch. Around 2 p.m. if all goes according to plan. In just a few hours, Thomas's carefully constructed world would begin to crumble. And I would be ready. Following Patricia's advice, I returned home to gather more financial documents while Olivia went to pick up some essentials from her hotel. We'd agreed to meet back at my house before Thomas was served with the restraining order, strengthen numbers for whatever reaction might come. The house felt different now, less like a home and more like a crime scene I was investigating. I went straight to Thomas's office, methodically working through filing cabinets and drawers. Most of the documents I found were familiar. Tax returns I'd co-signed, investment statements I'd reviewed. But in the back of his desk drawer, beneath, a false bottom I'd never known existed, I discovered a manila envelope. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were bank statements from an account I'd never seen before, Chase Manhattan, in Thomas's name only. The most recent statement showed a balance of $387,652, almost $400,000 he'd kept hidden from me. I spread the statements across his desk, tracking the account's history. It had been opened 5 years ago with a deposit of $50,000. Right around the time Thomas had received a bonus he'd claimed was only $20,000 after taxes. Regular deposits followed, always in amounts that wouldn't raise my suspicion when they disappeared from our joint accounts. For 5 years, he'd been siphoning money, preparing his escape. This wasn't just a recent betrayal sparked by meeting Amara. This was long-term deception, methodical and calculated. I photographed every statement, my hands shaking with rage, then carefully returned them exactly as I'd found them. Thomas couldn't. No, I'd discovered this account. Not yet. Continuing my search, I found more evidence of his double life. A second cell phone tucked inside an old briefcase in the closet. A passport with entry stamps for Dubai dating back 18 months, far earlier than the investment conference where he claimed to have met Amara. Credit card statements showing purchases at high-end jewelry stores and luxury hotels in Dubai and London. Each discovery was like a physical blow, forcing me to rewrite the narrative of our marriage yet again. Thomas hadn't just fallen for a scam or succumbed to a midlife infatuation. He had been systematically deceiving me for years. I was still photographing documents when my phone buzzed with a text from Michael Chen. "Found something significant. Can you talk?" I quickly responded, "Yes," and he called immediately. "Rebecca," he began without preamble, "I've been analyzing the transfers to Amara Holdings LLC. The primary transfer, the retirement funds, is what we discussed. But I've found a pattern of smaller transfers dating back almost 2 years." "From our joint accounts?" I asked, though I already suspected. The answer: "No, that's what's interesting. They're coming from an account at Chase Manhattan in Thomas's name only. Were you aware of this account?" A cold wave of validation washed over me. I just found statements for it hidden in his desk, almost $400,000. "That matches what I'm seeing," Michael confirmed. But here's where it gets more concerning. The transfers to Dubai weren't just going to Amara Holdings. There were also substantial payments to a law firm in Dubai specializing in residency and citizenship applications. The implication hit me, like a physical blow. "You think he was planning to move there, permanently?" "It appears that way. The payment schedule and amounts align with the UAE's investment visa program. For a certain level of investment, they offer long-term residency rights." I sank into Thomas's office chair, trying to process this new information. Not only had Thomas stolen our retirement funds and maintained a secret account, but he'd been actively planning a new life in Dubai, a life that clearly didn't include me. "There's more," Michael continued, his voice gentle but professional. "The forensic team has been analyzing email communications between Thomas and Amara that you provided. There are references to property viewings for villas in Palm Jumeirah, Dubai's luxury island development." "When?" I managed to ask. "The most recent exchange was 3 weeks ago. They were discussing final arrangements for a property purchase scheduled to close next month." Next month. While I'd been planning our summer vacation to the lake house, Thomas had been planning his escape. Were there personal elements to the communications? I forced myself to ask, needing to know the full extent of the betrayal. "Yes," Michael said simply. "The exchanges confirm an intimate relationship." "I'm sorry, Rebecca." I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. "Thank you for telling me. Is there anything else I need to know right now?" "Just one thing. Based on the timing of transfers and the communications we've reviewed, we believe Thomas may have been planning to leave within the next 30 days. The emergency restraining order came just in time." After hanging up, I sat motionless in Thomas's chair, surrounded by the evidence of his elaborate deception. Our entire marriage felt like a fiction, a story I'd believed while Thomas had been, writing a completely different narrative. I was still sitting there when Olivia arrived, letting herself in with the spare key I'd given her years ago. "Becca," she called, her footsteps quick on the stairs. "Where are you?" "In here," I answered, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. She appeared in the doorway, taking in the scene. The documents spread across the desk, my pale face. The second phone I'd discovered lying on top of the papers. "What did you find?" she asked quietly. I told her everything. The hidden account, the passport stamps, the visa application, the property purchase in Dubai. As I spoke, her expression hardened from concern to cold fury. "That calculating son of a bitch," she said, when I finished. This wasn't just an affair or a bad investment. This was a complete exit strategy. He was going to disappear, I said, the reality of it still sinking in. Take the money and start a new life with her, leaving me with nothing. Olivia knelt beside the chair, taking my hands in hers. But he didn't succeed. You caught him, and now he's going to face the consequences. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Order granted, process server en route to Thomas's office, estimated delivery 2:15 p.m. I showed the message to Olivia. It's happening, she nodded grimly. Good. Do you want to be here when he comes home, or would you prefer to be elsewhere? I considered the question carefully. Part of me wanted to be far away, avoiding the inevitable confrontation. But another part, the part that had been finding its strength over the past 2 days, wanted to see his face when his carefully constructed plans collapsed. I want to be here, I decided. But I don't want to be alone with him. You won't be, Olivia assured me. I'll stay right beside you. We spent the next hour organizing the evidence I'd gathered, making copies of everything for Patricia and Michael. At 2:30 p.m., my phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Harrington? A formal voice asked when I answered. This is Jason Reynolds from Accurate Legal Services. I'm calling to confirm that I've served legal documents to Thomas Harrington at 2:23 p.m. today at his office address. He has been officially notified of the temporary restraining order regarding your financial accounts. Thank you, I said, my heart racing. How did he react? There was a slight pause. I'm not required to report on reactions, ma'am, but I can tell you that Mr. Harrington did accept the documents after reviewing them briefly. After I hung up, Olivia and I exchanged glances. Now we wait, she said. We didn't have to wait long. At 2:47 p.m., my phone exploded with texts and calls from Thomas. I let them go to voicemail, following Patricia's instructions not to engage directly. At 3:22 p.m., we heard his car screech into the driveway. Olivia squeezed my hand as the front door slammed open. Rebecca! Thomas shouted, his voice echoing through the house. Where are you? I stood from the living room couch where we'd been waiting, Olivia rising beside me. I'm here, I called, my voice steadier than I expected. Thomas stormed into the room, his face contorted with rage. He stopped short when he saw Olivia. What the hell is this? He demanded, waving the legal documents clutched in his fist. What have you done? Protected what's left of my future, I replied, grateful for Olivia's solid presence beside me. The future you tried to steal. This is insane, he sputtered. A restraining order? Freezing our accounts? For what? Making an investment? It wasn't yours to invest, Thomas. That retirement account required my consent for any withdrawal or transfer. You committed fraud. He scoffed, though I could see a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. It's a technicality. We're married. What's mine is yours. Except for the Chase Manhattan account, I said quietly. The one with nearly $400,000 you've been hiding for 5 years. The color drained from his face. For the first time, Thomas Harrington, master of charm and deception, was speechless. Or the Dubai property purchase scheduled for next month, I continued, my confidence growing with each word. Or the residency visa you've been arranging. You've been spying on me? He asked, his shock quickly morphing back to anger. Olivia stepped forward slightly. She's been protecting herself from a husband who was planning to abandon her after stealing her retirement funds. I'd choose your next words very carefully, Thomas. He glared at Olivia. This is between me and my wife. Your soon-to-be ex-wife, I corrected. And no, it's not just between us anymore. It's between you and the legal system. Rebecca, he said, his tone suddenly shifting to the persuasive charm I'd fallen for so many times before. This is all a misunderstanding. Yes, I've made some mistakes. But the investment in Dubai is real. Amara is a business associate. Stop. I held up my hand. I've seen the emails, Thomas. I know about the affair. I know about your plans to leave. I know everything. He stared at me, recalculating. I could almost see the gears turning as he tried to formulate a new strategy. Fine, he said finally. Things with us haven't been good for a long time. You know that. I found someone else. It happens. But this legal attack is unnecessary. We could have worked this out privately, like adults. Like you were working it out by emptying our retirement account and planning to disappear to Dubai? I asked incredulously. That's not how adults handle things, Thomas. That's how criminals handle things. At the word criminals, his expression darkened. You're making a serious accusation. No, I'm stating a fact. What you did was illegal. The transfers, the hidden accounts, the wire fraud. All of it. Criminal. Thomas took a step toward me, his hands clenched into fists. You have no idea what you're talking about. Olivia moved between us. That's close enough, Thomas. If you take another step, I'm calling the police. For a moment, tension crackled in the air. Then Thomas stepped back, visibly forcing himself to calm down. This is ridiculous, he said. I can't even talk to my own wife without threats? You lost that right when you betrayed her trust, Olivia replied calmly. From now on, all communication goes through the attorneys. Fine, he snapped. Have Patricia call my lawyer. You'll be hearing from them. He turned to leave, then paused, looking back at me with a mixture of anger and something that might have been regret. I never wanted to hurt you, Rebecca. I just wanted something different. Something different, I repeated softly. $2 million and a new life with Amara different? While I was left with nothing? He had no answer for that. Without another word, Thomas stormed out of the house, the door slamming behind him. In the sudden silence, I felt my legs begin to shake. Olivia guided me back to the couch. You did it, she said, her voice filled with pride. You stood your ground. I nodded, unable to speak for a moment as the adrenaline ebbed, leaving me drained. He'll be back, won't he? I asked finally. With lawyers and excuses and demands? Probably, Olivia acknowledged. But you're ready for him now, and he knows it. As the reality of the confrontation settled around me, I realized something unexpected. Beneath the hurt and anger, I felt relief. The lies were exposed. The deception was in the open. Thomas's mask had finally dropped completely, revealing the stranger he truly was. And in that revelation, painful as it was, I found the first step toward freedom. The days following Thomas's initial blow-up fell into an uneasy pattern. He had moved to a hotel, at my insistence, backed by Patricia's legal advice, but his presence lingered in the house like a ghost. His clothing still hung in the closet. His toiletries remained in the bathroom. Physical reminders of the man I'd thought I knew. 3 days after being served with the restraining order, Thomas requested a meeting through his attorney, Marshall Delgado, a high-powered divorce lawyer known for aggressive tactics. You don't have to see him, Patricia advised during our daily morning call. We can handle everything through legal channels. I know, I said, staring out the window at the lake that had once represented our perfect life. But I want to. I need to hear whatever he has to say. Patricia sighed. If you're determined, we'll set it up at my office. Not your home, not a restaurant. Somewhere neutral with legal representation present, and we establish ground rules in advance. The meeting was scheduled for the following afternoon. I spent the morning in consultation with Michael Chen, who had made significant progress tracing the money trail. The good news, he explained, spreading documents across Patricia's conference table, is that we've located the bulk of the retirement funds. They were indeed transferred to Amara Holdings LLC, but they haven't been dispersed further. We've filed injunctions in both US and UAE courts to freeze those assets. And the bad news? I asked, having learned to brace for it. Thomas has already spent approximately $300,000 from the secret Chase account. Based on records we've obtained, most went to purchase gifts for Amara, jewelry, designer items, and to fund their lifestyle during his trips. To Dubai, $300,000 on another woman. The number should have devastated me, but at this point, it was just another figure in the catalog of betrayal. What are our chances of recovering the retirement funds? I asked, focusing on the practical rather than the emotional. Better than average, Michael said cautiously. The fact that the transfer was clearly illegal works in our favor, but international asset recovery takes time, sometimes years. And the criminal aspect? I pressed. The question had been weighing on me. Despite everything, the thought of Thomas facing criminal charges still felt surreal. Michael exchanged glances with Patricia. The unauthorized transfer of qualified retirement assets is a federal offense, he said gently. So is wire fraud. We've documented both. Once the civil case progresses, criminal referrals are likely. The door opened and Patricia's assistant appeared. Mr. Harrington and his attorney have arrived. Patricia turned to me. Are you ready for this? I smoothed my blazer, a power suit I'd worn to countless client meetings over the years, and nodded. As ready as I'll ever be. Thomas and his attorney were shown into the conference room. Marshal Delgado entered first, a sleek, silver-haired man in an expensive suit that screamed old money and ruthless litigation. Thomas followed, looking simultaneously defiant and diminished. His normally immaculate appearance showed signs of strain, shadows under his eyes, a slight stubble on his usually clean-shaven face. Our eyes met briefly before he looked away, taking a seat across the table. The physical distance between us, a polished expanse of mahogany, seemed an apt metaphor for what our marriage had become. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting, Delgado began, his voice smooth as silk. My client is hoping we can resolve this situation amicably, without the need for protracted legal battles that benefit no one except the attorneys. He smiled thinly at Patricia. We're always open to amicable solutions, Patricia replied, unruffled, provided they fully address the gravity of what has occurred. Delgado cleared his throat. My client acknowledges that certain financial decisions were made without proper consultation. However, he maintains that his intentions were to benefit the marital estate, not diminish it. I couldn't contain a short, incredulous laugh. Is that what you're calling it now? Benefiting the marital estate? Thomas looked up, meeting my eyes directly for the first time. Rebecca, I know you're angry. Angry doesn't begin to cover it, I interrupted, my voice surprisingly steady. You stole our retirement fund, Thomas. You had a secret account with hundreds of thousands of dollars. You were planning to move to Dubai with your mistress. Which part of that was intended to benefit me? The investment is real, he insisted, leaning forward. Yes, I made mistakes, personally and professionally. But the development in Dubai is legitimate. Amara may have misrepresented certain aspects of our relationship, but the business opportunity is sound. Patricia placed a calming hand on my arm as Delgado interjected. My client is prepared to make significant concessions to resolve this matter quickly. He's willing to provide Mrs. Harrington with the house, unencumbered, and a generous monthly support payment. In exchange for what? Patricia asked sharply. In exchange for dropping the financial injunctions and agreeing to an expedited no-fault divorce without further investigation into his business affairs. The audacity was breathtaking. I stared at Thomas, searching for any sign of the man I'd thought I married. You think you can buy me off after what you've done? I'm trying to make this right, Thomas said, frustration edging into his voice. The house is worth over $1 million. With alimony, you'd be well taken care of. While you run off to Dubai with what's left of our retirement fund? With the woman you've been sleeping with behind my back? I shook my head in disbelief. That's your idea of making things right? Thomas's expression hardened. The alternative is worse for both of us. A drawn-out legal battle, our private lives exposed in court, legal fees eating away whatever assets remain. He's right about the financial impact of litigation, Delgado added smoothly. No one wins in a prolonged divorce case. Except in this case, Patricia countered, where my client has documented evidence of financial fraud, unauthorized transfer of retirement assets, and hidden accounts. The law is quite clear on these matters. I leaned forward, looking directly at Thomas. Did you really think I wouldn't fight back? That I'd just accept whatever crumbs you decided to throw my way? A flash of the old Thomas, arrogant, dismissive, crossed his face. Frankly, yes. You've always followed my lead on financial matters. You've always trusted my judgment. It never occurred to me that you'd go this far. His words landed like a slap. Because you've never respected me, I realized aloud. 22 years together, and you still see me as some financial idiot who needs to be managed. That's not— It is, I cut him off. And that's exactly why you miscalculated so badly. You forgot that I'm a certified financial advisor who's spent my career helping clients protect their assets. You forgot that I understand retirement regulations better than you ever did. You forgot that I have resources and knowledge of my own. Thomas's face flushed with anger. Is that what this is about? Proving how smart you are? Showing me you can win? No, I said quietly. This is about justice, about consequences for actions, about not letting you steal my future and walk away, unscathed. Delgado attempted to redirect the conversation. Perhaps we should focus on concrete terms rather than emotional grievances. The concrete terms are simple, Patricia interjected. Full financial disclosure of all accounts and assets, return of the illegally transferred retirement funds, equitable division of all marital property, and acknowledgement of the legal violations that have occurred. Thomas slammed his hand on the table. This is extortion. You're threatening me with criminal charges to gain advantage in a divorce. No one has mentioned criminal charges except you, Patricia noted calmly. Though the facts certainly support such a possibility. Rebecca, Thomas said, ignoring the attorneys and appealing directly to me, his tone shifting to the persuasive charm I'd once found irresistible. We had 22 years together. Not all bad, surely. Does it have to end like this? With attorneys and threats and accusations? The question hung in the air. In that moment, I saw with perfect clarity the pattern of our entire marriage. Thomas, making unilateral decisions, then using emotional manipulation to bring me into line when I objected. It had worked countless times before. He clearly expected it to work again. Yes, I said firmly, it does have to end like this, because you chose to end our marriage the moment you began planning your escape with another woman and our money. I'm just making it official. Thomas stared at me, seemingly unable to process that his usual tactics had failed. You've changed, he said finally. No, I corrected him. I've always been this person. You just never bothered to see me clearly. Delgado cleared his throat. Perhaps we should adjourn for today. It seems emotions are running too high for productive negotiation. One more thing before we conclude, Patricia said, sliding a document across the table. This is a preservation notice regarding all of Mr. Harrington's electronic communications with Amara Khalid and anyone associated with Amara Holdings LLC. We'll be seeking full discovery of these communications as part of the divorce proceedings. Thomas paled visibly. Whatever was in those communications, beyond what I'd already seen, clearly disturbed him. This is a fishing expedition, Delgado protested. No, Patricia replied coolly. This is standard procedure in a case involving financial fraud and hidden assets. As the meeting concluded, I remained seated, watching Thomas gather his things. He paused before leaving, looking down at me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. Anger mixed with something that might have been regret. You know, he said quietly. This crusade of yours won't bring back the marriage. Whatever happens, with the money, with Amara, with all of it, we're done. I met his gaze steadily. I've made peace with that. Have you? He had no answer. With a curt nod to Patricia, he followed his attorney from the room. When the door closed behind them, I exhaled slowly, feeling the tension drain from my shoulders. That was intense, Patricia nodded approvingly. You held your ground beautifully. His attempt to charm and manipulate you failed completely. He seemed genuinely shocked by that, I observed. Men like Thomas rely on predictable reactions. When those reactions change, their entire strategy falls apart. She gathered her notes. He'll regroup and try again with different tactics. But you've shown him that the old patterns won't work anymore. Outside Patricia's office, Olivia was waiting, having deliberately stayed away from the meeting to avoid escalating tensions. How did it go? She asked anxiously. It went, I said, surprising myself with a small laugh. Thomas offered me the house and alimony in exchange for dropping everything else. Olivia's eyebrows shot up. The audacity! What did you say? I said no. Actually, I said a lot more than that. I recounted the confrontation as we walked to her car. The strangest part, I concluded, was realizing that I'm not afraid of him anymore. Not his anger, not his charm, not his manipulation. It's like the spell is broken. That's what happens when you see someone's true character, Olivia said, squeezing my arm. The power they held over you disappears. As we drove home, to the house Thomas had so generously offered me in exchange for his freedom, I felt an unexpected lightness. The confrontation had been difficult, painful even, but necessary. I had looked my betrayer in the eye and held firm. The road ahead would still be challenging. The legal battles were just beginning. The retirement funds remained in limbo. Thomas would undoubtedly try new tactics to escape the consequences of his actions. But for the first time since discovering his betrayal, I felt truly certain of my own strength. Thomas had underestimated me once. He wouldn't make that mistake again. 6 months after discovering Thomas's betrayal, I stood in the federal courthouse, watching as he entered a guilty plea for wire fraud and illegal transfer of retirement assets. His once confident posture was gone, replaced by the slumped shoulders of a man facing the consequences of his actions. The road to this moment had been long and arduous. Countless legal filings, forensic accounting revelations, the slow, methodical dismantling of Thomas's elaborate financial deception. In the end, it wasn't just my legal team that brought him down. It was Amara herself. 3 months into the legal proceedings, the Dubai court had ruled to return the frozen assets to the United States jurisdiction, a rare victory that Patricia had celebrated with an actual bottle of champagne in her office. But the true turning point came when Amara realized Thomas had been playing her just as he had played me. Michael Chen had discovered Thomas was simultaneously courting another woman in Singapore, another investment opportunity with another hidden account. When confronted with this evidence during a deposition, Thomas had denied everything. But Amara, watching the deposition via video link as required by the court, had seen the truth in his evasive responses. Within days, she had contacted Patricia, offering to cooperate fully in exchange for immunity from prosecution. The betrayer betrayed. Now, as the judge accepted Thomas's guilty plea, I felt no satisfaction, no vindication, just a profound weariness and an unexpected sense of closure. The defendant is remanded to custody pending sentencing, the judge announced. As federal marshals approached to take Thomas away, he turned and met my eyes across the courtroom. For a brief moment, I glimpsed something genuine in his expression. Not the manipulative charm he'd wielded for decades, but real regret. It was too little, too late. Outside the courthouse, Patricia briefed a small circle of reporters while I stood silently beside her, the reluctant public face of a cautionary tale about financial infidelity. This case should serve as a warning, Patricia concluded. Retirement accounts are protected by federal law for a reason. Unauthorized transfers of qualified retirement assets are not just marital disputes. They're federal crimes. As the reporters dispersed, Olivia appeared at my side. Ready to go? The team is waiting. The team had expanded considerably over the past months. Beyond Patricia and Michael, it now included Sam Wilson, who had helped me rebuild my financial planning practice with a new focus on helping women protect themselves from financial abuse. Dr. Eleanor Patel, whose therapy sessions had proven crucial to my emotional recovery, and several close friends who had stood by me despite Thomas's attempts to control the narrative. We gathered at Patricia's office for what I had dubbed the final war room meeting. The conference table that had once been covered with evidence of Thomas's crimes was now spread with documents of a different sort, the final divorce settlement and financial recovery plan. The retirement funds will be fully restored to a new qualified account in your name only, Patricia explained. The Dubai property that Thomas purchased in his name will be liquidated, with proceeds going toward legal fees and restitution. Michael nodded in agreement. We've also recovered approximately $200,000 from the hidden Chase account and safety deposit box contents. The total recovery represents about 85% of your original financial position, which is practically unheard of in cases like this, Patricia added. Most victims of financial fraud recover pennies on the dollar, if anything. Victim. The word still didn't sit right with me, even after all this time. I had been betrayed, deceived, nearly robbed of my financial security. But I had never been merely a victim. I had been a fighter, a strategist, a woman who had reclaimed her power. What about Thomas? Sam asked. What's the likely sentence? Based on similar cases and his guilty plea, probably 3 to 5 years, Patricia said, with restitution and significant financial penalties. He won't be destitute when he gets out, but he certainly won't be living the high life in Dubai. I nodded, processing this information with surprising detachment. Thomas's fate no longer defined my own, and Amara? Olivia asked. Returning to London, where she's facing separate fraud charges for similar schemes with other men, Michael explained. Her cooperation in our case may help her there, but she's still looking at serious legal consequences. As the meeting concluded, Patricia took my hand in a rare gesture of personal connection. You know, in 27 years of practicing law, I've never seen someone handle this kind of betrayal with more grace and determination. You should be proud, Rebecca. I had good help, I said, looking around at the allies who had become much more over these difficult months. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the city. Olivia linked her arm through mine as we walked to the car. So, she said, what now? The divorce is final. The money is recovered. Thomas is facing justice. What's next for Rebecca Harrington? It was a question I'd been considering for weeks. First, I think I'll sell the house. Too many memories, good and bad. I've been looking at condos downtown, closer to the office. Good. Olivia nodded approvingly. What else? I'm expanding my client practice. After the article about my case came out, I've had dozens of women contact me, some in situations similar to mine, others just wanting financial guidance from someone who understands vulnerability. The Rebecca Harrington Financial Protection Group, Olivia mused, has a nice ring to it. I laughed. Something like that. I've already hired 2 associates. We're developing specialized services for women going through divorce or sudden financial transitions. We reached the car, but instead of getting in immediately, I paused, looking back at the office building where so much of this journey had unfolded. You know what's strange? I said quietly. 6 months ago, I thought Thomas had destroyed my life. Now, I'm building something stronger than what I had before. Not strange at all, Olivia replied. You always had this strength in you. Thomas just never allowed you to see it. That evening, I sat alone on the balcony of my hotel suite, my temporary home while the house was being prepared for sale. The city lights spread before me, a tapestry of possibilities I was only beginning to explore. My phone buzzed with a text from Sam. Client signed. The Anderson portfolio is officially yours to manage. The Anderson portfolio, a significant account, Thomas had always handled personally, claiming it was too complex for me to manage. When Thomas's legal troubles became public, Mrs. Anderson had immediately sought me out, having always preferred my approach to financial planning. It was one of many small victories that had accumulated over the months, former clients returning, professional respect growing, my own confidence expanding beyond boundaries I hadn't realized had been imposed on me. My phone buzzed again. An email notification from my real estate agent. The offer I'd made on a downtown condo had been accepted. Another piece of my new life falling into place. I poured myself a glass of wine. Not the expensive Cabernet Thomas had always insisted upon, but a crisp Sauvignon Blanc I'd discovered I actually preferred. Another small rebellion against the preferences that had never truly been mine. As I sipped my wine, watching the city lights shimmer, I thought about the journey of the past 6 months. The shock and betrayal that had initially threatened to destroy me. The allies who had helped me find my footing. The strategic decisions that had led to today's resolution. Thomas had intended to steal my future. Instead, he had inadvertently given me a new one. Harder one, certainly, but more authentically mine than anything we had shared in our 22 years together. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The continuing legal aftermath. The emotional processing I was still working through with Dr. Patel. The reestablishment of my place in social and professional circles that had been rocked by the scandal. But for the first time since finding Thomas's text messages, all those months ago, I wasn't afraid of what lay ahead. I had survived the worst betrayal imaginable. I had fought back and won. I had discovered strengths I never knew I possessed. My phone rang. Helen Barrett, the friend who had initially hesitated to take sides in what she'd perceived as a simple marital dispute. Over time, as Thomas's crimes became public, she had apologized profusely for her initial skepticism. "Just checking in," she said when I answered. "Olivia told me about the plea hearing. How are you feeling?" "Honestly, better than I would have expected," I replied. "It's really over." "We're still on for dinner tomorrow?" "Absolutely. I'll be the one ordering champagne." After we hung up, I returned to the balcony, gazing out at the city that now represented possibility rather than loss. In the distance, I could just make out the lake where our house stood, the house that had witnessed the unraveling of one life and the beginning of another. Thomas had transferred our $2 million retirement fund to his secret girlfriend in Dubai. But I had reclaimed not just the money, but something far more valuable, my independence, my strength, and my future. He thought he was building his empire on the ruins of my life. Instead, I had used those very ruins as the foundation for something new, something entirely my own. And for that, in the strangest way, I almost felt grateful. Almost.